5.8 meter mini globe race circumnavigators have now gone from the Atlantic and the Caribbean to the Pacific, where the world is still very, very big. How will the Pacific epic be a different game than their trip across the Atlantic and the Caribbean? And what are the new challenges that confront them? And as always in my videos, what and how the ancient mariners did this. And I'll give you a hint, they were way ahead of the curve in understanding our planet. And lastly, how can you be a part of this too on your own 5.8 meter boat? All of this coming up without any fake AI or clickbait footage, I promise. Hi, this is Captain Tom again. I am a United States Coast Guard MMC, that's a Master Mariner Captain. I've been a skipper of sailing boats from dinghies up to about 70 feet length overall, and have sailed in almost every ocean. I've been a boat owner, and still am, a charter master, bareboat charter qualifier, sailing instructor, and have assisted in hundreds of sailors in embryo achieve their dreams over several decades. And, pertinent to this video, I am also a veteran of a Pacific crossing. But first, if you like this content, please punch that subscribe and like button and set the notification bell so you can get all of the future content that I'll put out about this and other sailing topics. And thanks to YouTube, this is all for free. Got it punched? Alright, let's dig into this intriguing subject. First, real quick to let some of you catch up. So what is a 5.8 meter mini class boat anyway? Well, it is a boat that is 5.8 meters long, or about 19 feet, especially designed to be a class, where all of the 5.8 boats are alike, with specific rules to make them as equal as possible to race ocean crossings and circumnavigations. Wow! And they're made of plywood. Yes, plywood! And mostly even self-built by their owners. At the time that this video was created, a fleet of these boats have all been single-handed racing from Portugal across the Atlantic and the Caribbean Sea, and have gone across the Isthmus of Panama, by land in this case, and not the canal, for a good reason, and are now sailing in the open ocean in the middle of the Pacific in their quest to circumnavigate the globe. 19 feet, I say? Yes, 19 feet. Small enough to fit in a typical suburban garage. I can only imagine the amazed looks of the commercial vessel crews as they see them on the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Now, this takes some planning, skills, and a very, very well thought out and durable boat. This boat against all of the oceans of the world. Let's drop in aboard one on the Pacific for a few minutes and get inside the head of one of the skippers. And I'll pick our beloved and fellow Lake Superior sailor from Canada, Turk, who built his own 5.80 as part of being a STEM teacher for his young class in Thunder Bay, Ontario. His class has been involved in this from the get-go. Wow, what an inspirational education they're getting along with all of this. But first, let's get some context. We now live in a world that's incredibly smaller than it used to be. With the advent of world air travel, aircraft can literally carry a small town at a time, across half the planet without refueling. We can step on a plane in one continent, culture, language, and climate, and get off in a completely different one with the same group of people that we stepped on the plane with. The only thing we experience is sitting in the same chair, and the only decisions we need to make are chicken or vegan for dinner, and the movies we want to watch. Usually people even slam the window shade shut for the duration. We don't need to worry about where we are at any particular point or how to find where we're going. And probably most significant is that we're there in a matter of hours, not weeks or even years, with typically no way of ever returning home. Imagine what the ancient Polynesian mariners, Zheng He, Magellan, and Columbus would think about that. Now, I'm not at all against air travel. It's a modern marvel that I take advantage of myself, and it has joined generations of my family together which would have never been possible otherwise. But what I ask, are we losing something if we don't relive and understand the world of these ancient mariners? I would argue that there is a depth of understanding, appreciation, and I dare say an inspiration that can be had if we slow down and just take the time and opportunity. Enter the Mini 5.8 Globe Race on stage. So as I've mentioned, the Mini 5.8 Globe Races are for the most part builders of their own boats. And I have a video about the story of Dan's building adventure that I'll put in a link in the comment section. They may be amateurs, but they have all become master mariners in every sense of the word, and I believe worthy to join the ranks of their ancient predecessors. They have had qualifying journeys, and for this edition of the Globe Race, have already crossed the Atlantic and the Caribbean. I would encourage you to follow them on their race website, which I'll put a link for in the comments. At the point when this video was made, they have left Panama, near the canal, and are now in deep water, getting accustomed to the shipping traffic and the daily routine of the sea that they're in. So how is what is ahead of them different than what they've had so far? So I would begin by saying that while the Atlantic is big, it is nowhere near the size of the Pacific, at least from a context of east to west. The distances across the Pacific are roughly 3 times that of the Atlantic. Also, the winds, currents, and latitudes will be different. So let's talk about the winds and currents first. As you see here from the NOAA representation, the Atlantic, and especially the Caribbean, has a predictable flow of wind in the direction of their crossing from east to west. Not a lot of what are called convergent zones, but hold that thought. And I would also add that at the time of their crossing into the Caribbean, generally not a place for hurricanes at this time of year. So I'll divert for one moment here in the depiction of the Atlantic. This one taken later in the summer, you'll see that that definitely changes. This shows the creation of Hurricane Irma, which eventually reached the USA. So time of year definitely matters. Okay, let's get back to the Pacific. We have a number of differences we want to talk about. When Vasco Balboa first laid eyes on the Pacific, he called it the South Ocean because he had crossed the Isthmus of Panama overland, which was north to south there. He had no idea of its actual size or place on the planet, nor that the Pacific was indeed not just south of Panama, but west of everything that he knew. Magellan, later, and just a heartbeat later in the scheme of things, less than 10 years, called it the Pacific Ocean because of its comparative calmness to what he had most immediately experienced, that being the Strait of Magellan near the Cape Horn at the tip of South America, a mere 600 miles from the as yet unknown Antarctic. Interestingly, he thought that he could cross the Pacific in 3 or 4 days. He mistakenly thought his journey to Asia was almost done. I believe that Balboa would have agreed with Magellan with the name of the Pacific if he had experienced the Strait of Magellan as well. The mini 5.8s are seeing the Pacific from Panama as Balboa did, but are seeing its calmer nature as Magellan named it. The eastern Pacific, near the equator, is famous for this. Panama and south to the equator is even considered a no cyclone or hurricane area. And this is due to there being a cold water current, the Peru current, the same current that brings penguins up from the Antarctic waters to the Galapagos, and prevents warm waters being present and incubating cyclones or hurricanes from forming. Another interesting reason why cyclones don't easily form at the equator in this place is that there is simply just not enough Coriolis force caused by the Earth's rotation to cause the spin of a storm to occur. If you look closely, you'll see that storms in the northern hemisphere have the counterclockwise wind rotation, but in the southern hemisphere, you'll see that the storms rotate clockwise. At the equator, you'll see that there is really no spinning at all. As the 5.8 fleet moves westward, however, the cold water currents are replaced by warm surface waters. Cyclones, and they're called typhoons, are definitely a concern. I know, I've been through several and was at sea for one. So here is Typhoon Mawar with 190-mile-an-hour winds. Typhoons can be some of the strongest cyclones on Earth. The 5.8 race directors will time the Western Pacific and transit into the Indian Ocean very carefully. But that's another video for later. As the 5.8s go south, they will meet up with what's called the trade winds flowing from east to west. This is their fuel, and they will need to take full advantage of it. What is most challenging about the Pacific at this latitude, to me, is not the cold and horrific gales of the high latitudes, but just the distances involved and the preparation needed to survive the time out there. The 5.8's next major stop is about 4,500 miles to Tahiti, which is only roughly about halfway across the Pacific that they will still need to cross. Now, in perspective, the first leg of the 5.8 mini race from the Canary Islands to Antigua is only 3,000 nautical miles total. And that's about a 30% longer journey. And that's just the first leg of the Pacific. And like running a marathon, the hardest part can be the last part. The first 1,000 miles is certainly not the same as the last. The famous mariner Thor Heyerdahl sailed that same stretch in the famous Kon-Tiki in 1947 in 101 days in a raft. Now, the Kon-Tiki essentially drifted with the currents. Sail, not so much. The Mini-Globes 5.8s are certainly better sailing boats than the Kon-Tiki, and they look like they're expecting to sail this in roughly 50 days. That's still about 2 months of being on the open water, and needing enough food and especially water for the journey. The class rules for the 5.8 state that the main freshwater tank must have at least 110 liters. This means that without replenishment and at an average speed of 4 knots, that the journey to Tahiti will take about 3 liters a day. No fresh water to waste. And remember, this is a race. Less weight is faster, especially on a small boat. My father, as an experienced ocean sailor, once told me, "The only way a water tank can be too big is if the boat sinks when you fill it." So it needs to be a strategic balance, that's for sure. Another challenge for the Mini-Globe 5.8s is that they will be crossing the Equatorial Convergence Zone, acronymed ITCZ. We just call it the itch, to get from Panama to Tahiti. Also called the doldrums, this area is known for its light winds and lumpy and erratic waves and sporadic, if not frequent, squalls. Truly frustrating for a sailor. This puts a lot of unpredictability into the progress of the journey. So here you'll just see the fleet kind of scatter, and this is a symptom of the doldrums. With so little wind and waves, it's just hard to even keep your boat pointing in the right direction. Also, with the unpredictable waves and nasty squalls, with sails changing and going up and down, it's just always seemed that fatigue is just that more of an issue. Another challenge that arises with the distance is that the farther you go and the longer you're out there, the greater the probability that something of critical importance will break. This is always in the back of the mind of a sailor. So I call it the better is an honest doubt than a foolish certainty philosophy. But the truth is, the longer that you are out there, the less there is that you can do about that honest doubt. So let's switch over to navigation now. We know from history what a less than 1 degree error in course did to Amelia Earhart's flight across this part of the South Pacific. This is serious stuff too. While the 5.8 meter sailors have the advantage of pinpoint electronic navigation, that is, if they don't have a problem with electrical power, the ancients did not. The ancients also didn't have the benefit of having the big picture of how the planet really worked, but they figured things out to an astounding degree. Remember when I suggested that we slow down and appreciate what they did? Let's look back in time and see how the ancient mariners navigated. Polynesian navigators were an elite group within their cultures. They passed their extensive knowledge from generation to generation, often in the form of elaborate songs. Celestially, they knew of the timing of the rising and setting of the sun and hundreds of stars, all from memory. The Hawaiian star chart, for example, divided the night sky into 8 families of 32 houses. They used the rising and setting of these star houses, probably similar to what we would call constellations today, to create stick charts, which they used to be able to get to and return from distant islands well outside of the sight of land. Did they understand the celestial mechanics like we do today? Well, perhaps not, but they were masters of taking full advantage of it. But that didn't stop them. And wait, there's more. They took advantage of every possible cue they could. The presence or lack of seabirds and their type, the nature of the ocean swells and changes in wind direction as they approached islands. You'll see here how the wind and therefore the waves are affected by the Hawaiian Islands. These effects were acutely studied and integrated by the masters. Different islands had different sizes and orientation to the prevailing wind. Each had their own recognized signature, so to speak. They also looked for presence of clouds, which indicated high elevation islands, or the mirage in the water of distant, much farther than the natural horizon, atolls. And no doubt what I'm mentioning here only scratches the surface. I bet when the first mainland navigators passed through, they likely did their best to communicate with their Polynesian counterparts and were no doubt astounded as to their navigation knowledge. So, let's watch our friends in the Mini 5.8 experience the transit of the same waters as the ancient Polynesian mariners did. Now, I would also add that the 5.8 mariners all began like you, with a dream. You can have that dream too. It's there for the taking. There are so many resources, and I'd begin with the 5.8 Mini Globe class website listed in the comments. So also, please stay tuned to this channel and I'll embellish this adventure from my own experience where I can. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you next time.